I can only see two possible outcomes for this video. Either I finish Dungeon Crawler Carl and I finally understand why everyone on the internet cannot stop recommending it constantly, every second of every day, or I'll finish it and I will once again be left wondering if we all read the same book or if I got a faulty copy somehow. This series has become the biggest thing in the bookish online space since Project Hail Mary, and as a certified hater of Project Hail Mary, sorry not sorry, I am a little concerned. As far as I can tell, the people who love Dungeon Crawler Carl and the people who were unhealthily obsessed with Project Hail Mary and quoting it all the time in all circumstances, whether appropriate or not, is literally just a circle. And that does not fill me with confidence. For a little bit of context on this series, it started as a web serial in 2020 and then was self-published by the author in ebook form, then was picked up and traditionally published in 2024, and since 2024 has sold well over 6 million copies. It's also been greenlit for a TV adaptation and somehow escaped the world of hardcore LitRPG fans into just the collective consciousness of your regular everyday reader. I would not be surprised if your teenage cousin and your 90-year-old grandmother are both reading the series and evangelizing about it. And I just want to put it out there, I am not the target audience for this book. I read a lot, I read widely, I read a lot of speculative fiction, I love sci-fi, fantasy, but I'm not a gamer. The closest I get to being a gamer is The Sims, and I will be an original Sims 1 fan forever, but I don't play video games. Generally, I have never played D&D, I've never read a lit RPG, and I'm just really not familiar with the mechanics. On top of that, I would say my sense of humor is pretty dry and sarcastic and deadpan and full of extremely excruciatingly terrible puns. And as far as I can tell, this is not that. But apparently half the fan base or more started off saying exactly the same thing and still ended up obsessed. So maybe I'm exactly who this book is for, actually. Maybe it's literally for everyone, as impossible as that may seem. So fine. I'm giving in, finally. I am reading the book. Honestly, what's the worst that could happen? As you saw, I was reading this morning and I finished the first chapter of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Why is that so hard to say? Dungeon Crawler Carl. Say that 5 times fast. And I was originally going to read to the first quarter mark, 25%, as I usually do, but I felt like it might be interesting to share my initial impressions of the first chapter before I continue. So I'm going to do that, but it is kind of early. All I've done this morning is have a shower, have coffee, and read that chapter. So I'm gonna do my makeup first, and then we'll chat about the first chapter of Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I'm partnering with Merit on this video, so I'm going to be using their products to get ready. So I've cleansed my skin, put moisturizer on, and now I'm going to use the Great Skin Instant Glow Serum from Merit. This is a lightweight biphase serum, and it instantly hydrates and plumps your skin for a healthy glow. It's also an amazing base for makeup. So I usually do 2 to 3 pumps, and then I just pat it into my skin. And again, all of Merit's products are non-comedogenic, so they're really great for sensitive or acne-prone skin. While I let that settle for a second, I'm grabbing my base, and I use the Minimalist. I'm pretty fair, and I have a neutral undertone, so linen is their fair neutral option. But the best thing about the Minimalist is in the name. It's a combination of multiple base products together, so instead of having to use a foundation or a tinted moisturizer and a concealer, you use one product. I just apply it directly to my skin and then blend it out. You can use your fingers or a brush. I'm gonna use a brush. Merit believes in products that leave your skin looking better than before you wore them, and that's why they put skin skin-loving ingredients into their products like plant-based squalene, vitamin B5, and antioxidants. And they've worked hard to eliminate ingredients that can trigger acne in sensitive skin or acne-prone skin, like nut oils and cocoa butter. All of their products are super buildable and really blendable, so you have lots of options. You can start light and build it up. Or even if you start with more product, especially if you're in a rush and you don't want to have to do multiple layers, it blends out super easily and nicely. I love this blending brush too. It's so soft. It's ridiculous. This product is all your base in one. So I apply it anywhere where I would have traditionally put concealer or foundation. All of Merit's products are vegan, cruelty-free, and EU compliant. I also like to get a good base on my lid so that it sort of acts as a base or a primer for any eye makeup I might do. Let's move on to blush. My favorite. I feel like if you've seen my face before with makeup on, then you know I love blush. I will not be hearing feedback at this time. People who don't love blush don't understand me on a spiritual level. I have multiple really beautiful shades of the Flesh Balm, but my current favorite shade is Fox, which is a warm taupe. And the Flesh Balm is a creamy tint, so it melts into your skin for a bit of a lit from within sort of natural flush or glow. And you can just apply it directly from the Flesh Balm. So I, as a huge blush fan, really go for it. And yes, I am one of those people. I put blush on my nose. Okay, I think it's cute. I like looking a little sunburnt, especially because I hopefully will never be sunburnt again because I'm trying to take care of my skin. You can use the #1 blending brush for this as well if you wanted. I just use my fingers. I like it being tactile, and I just blend it on my apples and then up to my sort of towards my temples. Oh, I love this shade so much. Definitely has a pink flush, but it's a very sort of warm pink, which I just think is so much more flattering on me personally. Because so many of Merit's products are buildable and start more sheer, but you can get a really beautiful finish and lots of saturation in the color if you build it up, and they don't get cakey, or you don't get a weird texture, they don't make your skin dry by applying more. I just feel like they can work on so many different skin tones and all year round. Ugh, it just blends so nicely, and it's such a pretty shade. Not everyone loves it on the nose. Okay, I get it. I get it. I think you're wrong, but I get it. I feel like when I don't have blush on yet, I just don't feel like me. And then as soon as I put blush on, I'm like, yeah, there she is. Okay, this is the stage where I add translucent powder just to make sure that all my complexion products are set. And again, I won't get cat hair stuck to me, which is the worst. Okay, now it's time for the eyes. So I'm gonna use Merit's Solo Shadow in Brun. So it's a creamed powder formula and it has a soft matte finish, which I love. I'm no makeup artist, but I've always found that with my eye shape, it looks nice to define the crease and the outer corner and then leave most of the inner portion a little bit lighter. And then it's time for liner. And I just like to apply it along my lash line to make my lashes look a little bit thicker. I will put mascara on as well, but I just find adding color to the lash line helps a lot. Okay, then it's time for mascara. I'm using their Clean Volume Mascara, which is their new mascara. And just like all of Merit's products, their mascara is very buildable. I will do one more coat of mascara once this coat is dry, but in the meantime, let's do lips. My favorite part. I have multiple Merit signature lipsticks, but my absolute favorite shade is Tiger, and it is very well loved. As you will see. This baby has been through the trenches with me, probably my most worn lipstick in the last couple of years. If you've ever watched one of my videos and wondered what lipstick I'm wearing or thought my lipstick looked nice, it was probably Tiger. It's more of a sheer, blurred matte finish. Tiger is a warm brick red, as you might expect from the name, and I just love it. It's so beautiful. It's also the most comfortable lipstick in existence. I am not exaggerating. It feels like you're wearing lip balm, but it actually has staying power. I don't know how they do that. It's magic, but it feels so nice. And again, as someone who lives in a really dry environment, my lips get so dry and can crack in the winter. And this is one of the few lipstick formulas that my lips can tolerate. Then lip liner. Because their lipsticks are sheer and buildable, you don't need a lip liner. And you also can combine them with different lip liners depending on what look you're going for. I like a bit more of a dramatic look with lipstick, so I like a darker lip liner. And I lately have been using the Brownstone lip liner, which is a deep warm brown. I love this combo. I love a brown lip liner, okay? I'm such a 90s kid. Just to make sure it all blends together beautifully. One more light layer of Tiger and to get all that beautiful brick red saturation. And that's it. That's the look. The signature bag comes free with every first order and it is so cute and also incredibly practical for travel. I use it every time I'm on the road. I love my Merit makeup. I love how easy it is to apply. I love how buildable it is. And they just have some of the most gorgeous shades. I love them. I'm not a professional makeup artist and I don't like to spend a lot of time on doing my makeup, and Merit is perfect to fit into my daily routine because they make products that are designed for daily life and impossible to mess up. I love that you can still see my freckles, but my imperfections are covered up. Makes me feel confident, like it's my skin but better, my face but better. Thank you so much to Merit for partnering with me on this video. Click my link or scan the QR code to check out my Merit favorites and shop exclusive sets discounted up to 15% off. And don't forget, every first purchase gets a free makeup bag. Okay, now that I'm camera ready, let's talk about the first chapter of Dungeon Crawler Carl before I go and finish the first quarter. In some ways, this is exactly what I expected. The first chapter was exactly what I expected. And in some ways, I was still surprised. I'm trying to keep an open mind. I'm trying to reserve judgment because I've only read one chapter. I will say the info dumping in the first chapter was a lot. It was a lot. It's certainly not the only book in the history of the world to info dump character development, backstory, world building, etc. But it was a lot. And I guess, again, I've never read any lit RPG, so you can let me know if you have and you know the genre better than I do. But I guess there's probably an element of explaining the rules, right? That makes sense to me, sort of giving you the structure. So explaining the dungeon and the levels and how it works, not every single intricacy. I'm sure we'll keep learning more as the book progresses, but giving us a bit of a baseline for that makes sense. I just don't love it. It's not my favorite way to deliver world building or character development. I would have loved maybe a couple chapters before this happens, Carl also seems very unsurprised by everything, which makes me wonder if, did they know that they'd made alien contact with aliens prior to this point? Or is he just a very unflappable person? I guess that is yet to be seen. I do love that there's a cat. I don't love that already the main character is joking about wanting to throttle the cat, even if it's in jest. Not my favorite. Even gentle, joking threats of animal cruelty are not my thing. But I am looking forward to a grumpy, fluffy cat. What can I say? I have a grumpy, fluffy cat, and he is my entire heart. Well, half of my heart, because Yoda, my house panther, my void is the other half. But yeah, not totally on board with the dynamic yet, but I have heard a lot about the cat being great and their rapport being great. So hopefully the threats of animal cruelty cease. There's not a huge amount of humor. I guess there's some sort of situational humor of, him being caught outside in his boxers, wearing his ex-girlfriend's too small pink Crocs. So far, I'm not finding it, particularly funny. It's not laugh out loud funny or anything. Maybe the jokes are to come. I also must say I'm a little bit disappointed that the main character, I thought the main character was meant to be an everyman who just is tossed into this ridiculous situation and has to try to survive. But the fact that he has a history in the Coast Guard, which I'm not American, and I know very little about the military, but my understanding is that the Coast Guard, at least in times of war, is part of the military, right? It's sort of a associated branch, and they do basic training in the Coast Guard, correct? Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I just don't know if I love that he probably has more training than the average person for, reacting in times of emergency. And not that I think someone should be, every main character has to be the least suited to whatever's happening, but I just don't want it to turn into a Gary Stu situation where he is just already good at everything. And the fact that he works as, I think, an electrician, electric technician on fancy yachts. I assume that skill set will come in handy. He'll rewire stuff, probably, if there is any wiring in the dungeon once he gets there. It's not like characters can't have skills. His skills just seem suspiciously suited to what's to come, while still trying to make him seem like a normal dude. He also talks explicitly about playing PlayStation, so he's a gamer, which also probably will help. And he says that he used to play D&D. So again, what are the odds that the man we're following and one of the few survivors, at least in this area, used to play D&D and is familiar with all of these rules? And also, why are these aliens from a different planet basing their dungeon reality TV show on a set of rules or a structure that is used in Earth games? Is that intentional? Will that be explained? Maybe it will. Maybe I'm asking questions that are answered in chapter 2. I don't know because I haven't read it yet. I can't say particularly that I like or dislike Carl yet. I feel very neutral. He seems like he's just a dude. I do think it's weird that he registers that probably a lot of people just died in a millisecond, and he doesn't seem sad. He could be in shock. Sure. He also doesn't seem to have even a second of worry for his ex, which may be fair. Maybe fair. But does he have friends? Does he have family? Is there not one person that popped into his head that he was wondering if they were still alive? Yeah, it's just a pattern I've noticed in some fiction, especially speculative fiction, fantasy, or sci-fi, written by men, the male protagonist, usually seemingly aimed at a male audience, where there's a bit of a, Gary Stu thing, which again is not just a male problem. We also have Mary Sue in fiction written for women or female main characters, but a bit of an everyman who is also an unexpected hero who's actually the smartest and best at everything sort of thing, which feels very wish fulfillment to me. Again, it reminds me a lot of Andy Weir's protagonists. It reminds me of the protagonist in The Will of the Many. And it just doesn't work for me. I also don't like when female characters are written like this either. But there is sort of a specific brand of the everyman becomes the hero the world needs, masculine version of the chosen one trope thing that is just not my favorite in pretty much any iteration I've read it in. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong to get those vibes, but I am getting those vibes, so it's maybe worth mentioning. I do feel like the first chapter was a little clunky. It really was just giving us as much backstory and info as possible all at once. And I think, again, it's not my favorite form of character development or world building or storytelling, but it's not, it's not unique to this story. However, I do feel that once a book starts info dumping like that, I do start to have less tolerance for unanswered questions. Because if we're going to pause the narrative for you to monologue at me, giving me all the details I need, and then you leave out important details, I'm going to notice that. Whereas if the narrative is slowly releasing information over time, or the character is slowly learning things, or it's just revealed when we need it in a more organic manner, then not knowing everything right away doesn't feel as dire because it's not set up the same way. You know what I mean? I'm also not saying that every book has to have a fish out of water main character, because that can also be annoying depending on how it's done, but I do kind of like it. But I do think that it would maybe help in this situation if the main character was a little less familiar with video games or D&D specifically, so that the rules are something that he has to learn over time and has not already synthesized, especially for me as a reader. And maybe again, it's meant to represent the reader that this is aimed at, which is also someone who plays video games and D&D and already knows the rules. And so that's probably intentional, I guess, now that I think about it, that the author didn't want to reiterate it or belabor the point for people who probably already know what he's talking about and know these rules. But as someone who doesn't, it would feel more inclusive or welcoming to me as a reader to have a main character who doesn't know everything yet. And I imagine there's still a lot about the system that he doesn't know or understand that he will learn over time, and I can learn that with him. And maybe it will end up being, a nothing burger and I'm complaining about nothing. But I do feel like this is a case where I would probably prefer a fish out of water main character at least a little bit, if only because I am a fish out of water in reading it because of my lack of familiarity with these kinds of games and rules, I'm also not entirely sure I understand the logic of what the aliens are doing. Again, I imagine we will learn more over time, but I do think it's weird that they have a system at all. I guess it's like a bureaucracy thing where they allow people on the planet to fight for their chance to reclaim their planet. Why is it done as a reality show? We don't know yet. Why is the reality show set up to follow human game rules when presumably no humans are going to be watching this reality show? Also don't know that yet. But what is the logic of killing everyone who just happens to be inside a building? And how did they choose what time? Did it happen at the same time everywhere all at once? Is the dungeon everywhere? Are there multiple dungeons? Did he happen to just be on top of the only dungeon? How big is it? Did people on the other side of the planet, where it is currently daytime, also get sucked into the ground and killed? And in which case, are there significantly more survivors on the other side of the planet because they're in a different time zone? I just have questions, And again, I imagine some of those will be answered. But because the first chapter was so much, here's all the info you need, let me just tell you all of it right now, then I feel like the omissions feel more glaring to me. And I just feel like there are things that are being left out that I want to know. And I'm less patient to wait for them because the book is set up that it will just give me everything all at once. And also, presumably, if they're doing the game show, reality show thing sort of begrudgingly because they have to according to their rules and they don't really care if it's entertaining or if there are many people participating, then that's one thing. But if they actually want it to be entertaining and to have participants, then you would think that they wouldn't want to kill all of their potential participants before it starts. But I think that's it. I think those are all my thoughts for the first chapter. We'll see. Again, probably a lot of my questions will be answered. At least I hope they will be sooner rather than later. But that's where I'm at after the first chapter. I don't really know how to feel yet. I don't really feel one way or the other. I am still cautious. I am still nervous. I would say that the first chapter continued to not necessarily instill confidence in me for my own personal tastes, but I didn't immediately despise it. I didn't find it ridiculously annoying and just have to DNF immediately. So that's something. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I will adjust to it and I'll end up loving it, or maybe not. We will still find out. I am also glad that he didn't leave Donut to freeze, even though probably bringing Donut into whatever this dungeon situation is not very safe either. So maybe I will eat my words later, but I also wouldn't want to leave my cat in the winter outside alone if pretty much everyone just died in an instant, you know? So I understand. So on that point, I agree with Carl. But also last thing, one more note. I do feel that the writing style is very short and choppy, lots of declarative statements, lots of me, I did this person, single word sentence, very short sentence, another very short sentence. It's all very, almost comes across sort of monotone. And I will say I'm doing a tandem read where I'm reading the ebook, but I'm also listening to the audiobook at the same time. And the audiobook narrator is giving more life to the character and to the text. And I have heard a lot of people say that the audiobook is amazing and they loved the narration. I do think the narrator is doing a lot of work here because the actual words on the page are the writing style is very choppy and pretty monotone and a bit bland. If I were reading it in my head, it would be much less engaging, let's say that. But that is also very much personal preference, just like everything else when it comes to reading books. Because some people love this kind of writing style. It's just not my favorite. I prefer longer sentences. I prefer a writing style that has a bit more of a flow to it. It doesn't have to be overwritten or purple prose or really lyrical or anything, but I do like language that has a bit more variety, some longer sentences, some shorter sentences, a bit of a rhythm or a flow to it. And I don't feel that here. But again, that's just my personal preference. Okay, bye. That's it. That's all I had to say. I am a third of the way through Dungeon Crawler Carl. I just finished chapter 19, so I'm 34% of the way through, according to my ebook. And listen, let me say this first, okay? Especially in case anyone is watching this who has never watched one of my videos before. I just want to be very upfront. I don't enjoy having an unpopular opinion about books. I share my honest thoughts. I truly feel like it would be worthless for me to share my thoughts on books on the internet if I wasn't honest about how I felt. And I try to be specific and detailed because I think that is helpful. Whether I like a book or dislike a book, if I'm detailed enough, my hope is that that will be useful to someone to decide if the book might be for them or not. If I just say, this book isn't for me, that doesn't really help anyone, in my opinion. That being said, I like to like things. I like to have fun when I read. I like to enjoy the books I read. I love being able to rave about the books I love. That's my favorite thing. I also love being in on the hype train. I love getting to love the same thing that lots of other people are loving at the same time, and all of us just being excited together. That's great. It's so much fun. So even though I obviously went into this and I was very upfront about the fact that I didn't think I was the target audience and I wasn't sure if I would enjoy this book based on what I understood it to be, I still had hope, like I said, that I would be one of those people who said basically that verbatim and then had their minds changed by the book and loved it and had a great time. That was my hope for this video. And I'm not saying that couldn't still happen because it certainly could, but I am a full third of the way through now and it hasn't happened yet. And that does make me very nervous. So just keep in mind that I'm trying to be specific to be helpful, not to be mean or something. And also that I genuinely want to like this. I genuinely want this book to change my mind and to make me love it. I am not hoping to hate it, actually. Okay, so that being said, let me try to go through all of the things I am feeling. I actually reread basically the entire first third again because I wanted to have examples and I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing things or I wasn't making assumptions based on vibes instead of what's actually on the page. I also took a lot of time to think about it. I didn't just finish the first third. I finished it more than a day ago and then I sat with it for a while because I wanted to try to clearly articulate my thoughts and to form my opinion more solidly before I shared it. So I'm a third of the way through and I have not been convinced. I don't understand the hype yet. And obviously this is just my opinion and my personal taste, and other people clearly are reacting differently to it. While I have seen people have the reaction of I bounced off it at first, I wasn't enjoying it, and then at some point that shifted. I'm not sure when that shifted for most people, but I have seen that experience relayed, so maybe that could still happen for me. But I've also seen a lot of people say I loved it from the first page. And I can understand that people, if someone has a different sense of humor to me, if they value different things in the books they read, or if they're just interpreting the things in the book differently than I am, then they could be having fun from the start. Whereas for me, that has not been the case. So to maybe try to soften the blow a bit, I will start with my one positive. Unfortunately, there is only the one. I promise I am not trying to be ridiculously overly harsh for no reason, okay? I racked my brain for positives to share to try to even things out, and this is the one I have, okay? The narration is really good. It is very good. I agree. I think the narrator is really pulling a lot of weight here. I think the narrator is very much responsible for a lot of the love for this book, and I have seen a lot of people say that they were not enjoying the book or couldn't get into it, and then when they switched to the audiobook, everything changed. Now, I've been doing a tandem read, so I'm listening to the audiobook as I read the ebook since the beginning. So I had that experience from the beginning. For me personally, the narration has not been enough to allow me to ignore the other things that aren't working for me. However, I do want to give the narrator, Jeff Hayes, his due. He's doing an amazing job. He's like the male Moira Quirk. He's great. And I do think that there is something to be said about a narrator who really gets the characters, really breathes life into the story. What I do disagree with is that there aren't a lot of narrators in the world doing this, because there are so many incredible narrators in the world. As someone who has loved audiobooks for as long as I can remember, whose parents bought me books on tape and full dramatizations on tape from a very young age, there are a lot of talented voice actors in the world, and they put their all into their narration. So Jeff Hayes, Moira Quirk, the other select few that get brought up in these conversations, they are not the only voice actors in the world, and they're not the only ones who are killing it. So I just want to point that out as well. Maybe I, as someone who has a degree in theater, in musical theater, I think that acting, voice acting, can be undervalued skills and careers. And again, as someone who listens to a lot of audiobooks, I hear amazing narration all the time. So while I don't want to diminish Jeff Hayes and his skill and his talent and how much he's bringing to the book and how much life he's breathing into it and how much he might be bridging the gap for people who otherwise would struggle with various aspects of the story or the execution, I do also think people might be overstating it or undervaluing other narrators. And I think it's maybe useful to lift up people who are doing an amazing job, celebrate them, compliment them, let people know that the audiobook is amazing without necessarily simultaneously diminishing an entire industry of professionals who are, many of whom are incredibly talented and putting their whole heart and soul into their narration. Do you know what I mean? So I just want to say that. It is a positive though, because Jeff Hayes is doing a great job. Love his narration. He's great. I will say that one update from the game itself, that was apparently someone on the team having a foot fetish. The way that Jeff Hayes narrated that achievement or reward gave me the heebie-jeebies, and I did not enjoy it. Everything else, all this other narration has been very good, in my opinion. I promise this is a positive, but I did kind of want to use this as an opportunity because people praise the narration so much and praise Jeff Hayes so much. He is not an exception to the rule. He is very talented, but so are so many audiobook narrators. Give narrators their due. You know, learn the names of your favorite narrators. Shout them out by name. Give them credit and appreciate what they do to bring stories to life, because I do think it's such an undervalued career skill, and it's a skill that is being lost. It's a skill that big companies are trying to replace by AI narration, and there just is no soul, literally by definition, in AI narration, okay? Please do not buy and listen to audiobooks narrated by AI. Please listen to books narrated by real human beings, and then appreciate all of the years of studying and practice and skill and talent and effort that they are putting into their performances, because it's hard and it's amazing. Okay, so good job, Jeff Hayes. You're great. I appreciate you. And all your fellow incredible narrators. However, his narration has not been enough to cover up the issues that I am having personally, in my own personal opinion, with this book so far. So I've tried to organize my notes so that I don't repeat myself too much and I can be very concise while also being specific. So I'm going to start with the humor. I think this is a big one. I think a book that relies so heavily on humor, that has such a humorous tone, is just by its very nature going to be very much hinging upon the humor working for the reader and those aligning. And for me, so far, the humor is just not really landing. For me, the humor just gets a little too overwrought. It's a little too silly and absurd all the time. It feels like it's always on 10, and I do find that a bit exhausting. I also feel like the humor is really hinging on real life identities as the punchline. And I don't love that, personally. I don't particularly find incels funny, for example. So making a joke that a particular type of goblin is like the incel of the goblins and will attack women first, that's not funny to me. Because incels are a very serious problem and a growing problem. And it's not like the narrative takes time with that to really satirize it or examine it at all. It's just a one-off throwaway line. And I don't find incels funny. So that didn't land for me. That type of humor can work for me if it is very intertwined with social commentary. And I have heard people describe this series as social commentary through humor. I am not personally seeing a lot of social commentary so far. I don't think just bringing up the concept of an incel in passing in the description of an alien monster creature is social commentary. You know, naming things is not commentary. Now, I'm in the first third, maybe in the second 2/3 of the book, there is a lot of commentary. I'm open to that. But so far, the silly, absurd humor isn't grounded by any commentary. And then there's just a lot of humor that I'm not sure what part of it was meant to be funny. It's just not landing with me. It's just not landing with me either. It's a very quippy, it's very reference heavy. In the last chapter I read, or second last chapter I read, Donut becomes friends with two goblin ladies and names them Lorelai and Rory. And, you know, I love Gilmore Girls as much as the next millennial white woman from North America. And yet that reference does nothing for me. You know, like I don't just inherently find it funny that the characters who are supposed to exist in our modern world know about things that exist in the modern world. And it's okay if you do find that funny. Obviously, different people find different things funny. I'm not laughing, unfortunately. I would love to be laughing. And perhaps that time will come. But so far the humor is not landing with me, and that's unfortunate. It is what it is, you know? I think that is a pretty big piece of the puzzle for why people love this book. At least I have seen people bring it up as being fun and entertaining and funny so much in conversation around this book that I can only infer that that is a big draw for people. Unfortunately, my sense of humor is very specific. I can be a bit picky about the things I find funny. It's just who I am. So yeah, unfortunately. The second part is the prose, the actual writing, the word choice, the structure, the flow. I think I mentioned this in the first chapter reaction. The sentences are very short and choppy. The chapters are also incredibly short, but something that is becoming more and more glaring to me and I'm really struggling with is how repetitive the writing is. And repetitive on a word level, sometimes within the same sentence, sometimes within a paragraph. it is pretty glaring. So I'm going to read some examples to you because I feel like that really drives home my point without necessarily having to say too much else about it. Also, as a side note, I didn't mention this in my review of the first chapter. I think I forgot about this, but I do love that the book starts with a quote about Rome, because I do feel like bros do keep being obsessed with Rome for no reason. Like, it's such a bro trait to be obsessed with Rome. It's like the universally accepted hyperfixation of boys and men. Rome and World War II. Anyways, moving on. So, repetitive sentences. I will give you some examples. Green lichen-like growths glowed on the brick walls and ceilings, giving the tunnel an odd glow. Chapter 3. The creature barely weighed anything, surprising me. I picked him up as he grunted in surprise. I am what's called a non-combatant NPC. I am like you. I'm a person whose world was displaced. This was many, many solars ago. I was a dungeon crawler, just like you. Is he like him? I can't tell. He walked over to the shelf with the upset vase and he picked up a framed photo of one of the bird creatures. He handed it to me. It looked remarkably like a normal framed photo. Why did we have to say framed photo twice in that passage? Again, like, I understand some people are going to think this is nitpicky, but this to me is the difference between a first draft and a final draft. You go through your own work yourself, and ideally have an editor go through your work and you say, I wonder if we could say this a different way, or I wonder if we could rework 3 sentences into something a little bit more elegant and smooth. It doesn't have to be lyrical, overwrought prose, but we don't have to say framed photo twice in a couple sentences. We don't have to say, I am like you, and then I was a dungeon crawler just like you in the same paragraph. The ideas can be presented in a more elegant way. Okay, chapter 8. The skin disappeared from the inventory menu along with one of the steaks. The corpse's skin disappeared, leaving just a gross pile of muscle. Why did we need to say the skin disappeared twice? In 2 sentences. Okay, then we have the end of chapter 8 going into the beginning of chapter 9. The last sentence of chapter 8 is, we entered the safe room. And then chapter 9 starts with the title, Entering Safe Room. And then the first line of chapter 9 is, we entered the room. And both of us stopped at the entrance, gaping. So as I was reading, this was my experience. We entered the safe room. Chapter 9, entering safe room. We entered the room and both of us stopped at the entrance, gaping. Anyway, those are a bunch of examples. I just find the prose very simplistic and incredibly repetitive, and I understand the background of the story, it being published online first and then self-published before getting picked up. I don't know how much external editing was done. I don't know how many rounds of editing were done, but this to me reads like a first draft, just the ideas being put down, and it's fine. Not every book has to be written in the most poetic, overwrought, lyrical language to exist. That's fine. Yeah, certainly not. However, to me, this reads unfinished and unpolished in a way that I am finding very distracting. And unfortunately, Jeff Hayes' narration is not enough to make me forget. I feel constantly aware of the writing and those little clunky repetitive bits to the point where I feel like I can't disappear into the writing or into the world. I will also say that so much of this first section is spent in tutorials, and perhaps I misunderstood what LitRPG was all about. I guess this is just part of the genre, and if so, perhaps this genre is just not for me. Both the many, many repeated, very long-winded tutorials, but also all of the achievements and the rewards, and talking about sitting down with their 15 rewards for the last 6 hours and opening them one at a time. We get the description, what it can do, what it's worth, how many new points they get for each reward. We just go down the list for each Carl and Donut over and over again. That to me, I think you could communicate the things we're learning in the tutorial, how he can navigate his user interface, his HUD, how he can manipulate the map, how he can pull things out of his inventory and put them into his inventory. Some of that stuff I understand wanting the audience to understand, and I don't mind learning this information. What I do mind is it being info dumped on me and just having everything explained in such great detail for so long. I think the longest chapters are the tutorial chapters, and I just think they go on for too long. I think so much of this we could be told within the narrative. I think it would be, for me personally, it would be more interesting. And I think we could learn things as it became relevant instead of learning all of this detail all at once and then it not coming up again for ages. And then by the time it comes up again, either the book has to remind us what it means because we've forgotten now at this point, or it doesn't, but we still don't remember because we learned 500 tiny details all at once at the beginning of the book. And now it's been however many chapters since then. I just think it's a little bit clunky in the way that it's being handled. And I personally am not a fan of info dumping world building. Again, if this is just part of the genre, it's just part of the genre. But I do think there is a question of the conventions of the genre, learning how the user interface works, learning how you gain skill points and different types of skills and so on. That is part of the world building. And I understand wanting to express that to the reader, but it doesn't have to be expressed like this. You know, I think I haven't played a lot of video games, but I can say that the ones I have played, the tutorial has been the least fun part of the game. And the fact that it's basically translated one-to-one into a novel form where you don't even get to use it. I don't need to know how to use the user interface and how to manipulate the map because I can't do that. I'm just reading the book. I am reading about Carl doing it. As long as Carl can do it, we're good. And I don't need to know how he does it. If I know he has a map and he can manage it, great. I don't actually need to know how it works on a detailed level because I will never have to do it myself. But again, maybe that is just part of how the genre works. I don't have to understand it necessarily because maybe it's just not for me, but I did find the tutorials to drag significantly. I think they dragged down the pacing a lot. And I also just found it to be a little bit of a lazy narrative device to have these for them to be able to access this teacher and to get a tutorial as many times as they need it, to have so many opportunities to ask their questions and get them answered, instead of them struggling and us watching them figure it out as they go along in the moment when they need things and struggle and fail and then figure it out, which maybe would be more rewarding. I don't know. It just feels very easy when they can ask all of their questions and get them answered essentially whenever they want and at great length at some point. Like, I don't mind Mordecai as a character, but I do think his role in the story is to explain everything that Carl doesn't understand. And that to me is removing some of the discovery and curiosity and tension. If Carl has no idea what's going on and has to figure it out because it's a life or death situation, that is intense. That makes me interested in him figuring out how to use his inventory because he wants to be able to store the things he's coming across for later, and he has to figure it out, and the stakes are high, versus him just sitting there for what feels like hours having all of this explained to him by the wise mage, you know? And it just goes on for so long. I also love that even Carl points out how long it's going for in the first tutorial. Yeah, I said dryly, you wouldn't let me open my boxes yet. Can I do it now? Hold up, kid, Mordecai said. We have a process here. We'll get there in a minute. And then he just goes on and on and on and on and on and on, explaining things. Like, none of this is relevant right now. Actually, almost none of this is currently relevant. We're just getting all of the info dumped on us. And it's probably that first tutorial is probably the longest chapter in the entire book, which is wild. Also, as a side note, I guessed from early on that Carl was going to be oddly perfectly suited to this environment, despite sort of being set up as your everyman who's a fish out of water. And I love that in chapter 2, he talks about his background. That said, most people I encountered who'd never been in the service didn't realize that we trained as much as we did. People thought of us as glorified lifeguards. They had no idea how much we trained in hand-to-hand combat. Well, that'll come in handy, won't it? How convenient. Anyways, also, Carl, once again, being a very normal man. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but this is important information right here. I stand 6 foot 3 inches tall. I weigh around 230 pounds. And while I wasn't in nearly as good shape as I was while I was on active duty, I'd been hitting the gym 3 times a week for years, building my muscle mass. I'd always been blessed with one of those bodies that naturally held muscle well. My dad was a linebacker. Hell, even my mom was 5'10", and her dad had played center for Oregon State before becoming a prison guard. It's just like, it's actually hilarious. It's very funny to me. I'm just one of those people. I build muscles so easily. Isn't that funny and weird? I basically don't train except 3 days a week. And I've been actively building muscles for years and years. But, you know, I'm not in active training anymore. It's just like, okay, sure. Very normal dude. Total everyman that every reader can relate to. So anyways, we also get lots of achievements, and sometimes the achievements are literally the whole page. Achievement after achievement after achievement. New achievement, you've entered a guild hall. Congratulations, you know how to open doors. Reward, that sense of fulfillment you feel, that's reward enough. New achievement, podophilia, you've used your bare feet to crush and kill an opponent. Hey, that's my fetish. Seriously, keep doing it and you'll be rewarded. This will help. Reward, you received a gold shoebox. New achievement, boom, you've caused a wall shaking explosion within the dungeon. The last time the walls shook like this was when your mom came over for a visit. Reward, you've received a silver goblin box. Oh, a your mom joke and a fat joke all in one. I hadn't even highlighted that one. Again, this is not my humor. I hesitate to say it sounds like a teenage boy's sense of humor, but I will say the last time I heard your mom jokes said in full earnestness and seriousness was by a teenage boy when I was also a teenager. So do with that what you will. And then they proceed to open all the boxes one at a time and we get all of the details. Bronze Adventurer Box, 2 of 10. Potion of Healing, ×2. Common Fingerless Gloves. Bronze Weapon Box, 3 of 10. Toad Cudgel. Bronze Weapon Box, 4 out of 10. Poker. Bronze Adventurer Box, 5 out of 10. Potion of Healing. Potion of Mana. And it just goes on and 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 on. Again, maybe that's what LitRPG is, in which case LitRPG and my specific form of ADHD are not a match made in heaven, because I'm not gonna lie, when I was reading these couple chapters, I kept falling asleep. It was a struggle. Okay, moving on. There was an item called Enchanted Crown of the Sepsis Whore. Again, sorry, is sepsis supposed to be funny? People genuinely die of sepsis. I'm not intentionally trying to not find it funny. I just don't find it funny. It's not my sense of humor at all. I don't get what part of it is funny. Again, someone else might find it uproariously hilarious and other people have different senses of humor. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I just am saying I don't get it. Okay, and then I don't know if this is meant to be a joke or if it's characterization for Carl. The signs on the walls were in a weird language. Polish, maybe. What is weird about Polish? We don't know if it actually is Polish or not. We just know that he thinks that his first thought when he sees a weird language is to think that it might be Polish. Then we have characterization. Again, I'm only a third of the way through. I say only. I do think that that's a pretty significant portion of the book to have opinions about, which is part of why I kept reading a little bit more than where I had originally planned on stopping. But it is still only a third. So obviously, things can change a lot, especially in terms of the plot and the way themes are being explored and characterization. However, in the first third, I feel like there is very little characterization. I know things about Carl, but I don't feel like I know him or that I understand him. I don't feel like I understand his emotional experience of this situation. I feel like every time the book approaches his emotional experience, which usually is through telling us that he's sick to his stomach or feels sick, it then immediately backs off again, either by another character making a joke or something happening. We are not allowed to sit in his emotions or discomfort about the things that he's experiencing. We're not allowed to sit in the horror of the situation. And that to me is really making me feel like I am not being given an opportunity to get to know Carl on a deeper level. And considering how much of this book so far is just Carl and Donut together, I want to get to know them. I want to understand them on a deep level. I want to feel like I know them as much as I could know any protagonist. And so far, Carl feels pretty impenetrable to me, and I just don't feel emotionally connected to him. And again, that's just my experience. I'm sure there are people reading it who connected to him immediately. I just feel like I'm not getting a lot from him. I don't feel like I really know how he feels about any of this, and maybe that's coming. I certainly hope it is. But as of yet, I'm really not feeling all that invested. I feel like simultaneously a lot is happening and very little is happening. I feel like everything that's happening kind of feels like a rehash of the same thing. It might be a different kind of monster, a different kind of creature, but everything kind of follows the same formula. And I don't feel like we're moving forward. And perhaps because they haven't actually moved from the first level yet, maybe that's part of it. Maybe once they start moving through the levels, I don't actually know how many levels they go through in this book. It actually occurs to me that considering how many books are in the series, Is the entire series him moving through the levels of the dungeon? Does every book only cover a couple levels? Because that pacing is ridiculously slow in my mind for something that's presumably sort of set up as being a fast-paced, action-packed sort of story. Again, the tutorials, the lit RPG mechanics, this might just be a genre convention thing. I might just be reckoning with the fact that this is not for me, that I don't enjoy it. I just don't get the appeal, to be honest. I can't say that the idea of a video game tutorial is that fun, even if I were then going to be able to play the video game, but it certainly doesn't interest me if I'm then not playing, but I'm reading someone else play with no influence and no ability to use the tools that I had to learn about in great detail. I don't really feel as though this book is setting the scene for me too much. I don't feel as though the environments are being described in great detail. I often feel as though the descriptions stop at, there was a hallway with a door at the end, and then no other description of what materials the walls and floor were made out of, and how bright is the light, and does it smell like anything? Does the air feel like anything? I don't know. I don't feel like there was much atmosphere or much sense of place, and everything just kind of feels like it's suspended in a featureless void, which I personally don't love in the books I read. I really appreciate a strong sense of place and great atmosphere, and I don't personally feel like this book is delivering on those things. And so I'm not finding it particularly immersive. I don't feel really drawn in. I also am not loving the areas that this book continues to focus its narrative attention, especially when it comes to women's bodies. And so far, there aren't that many women on the page. We have a female cat. So far, we have met a couple goblin women right at the end there, one female boss level character, and one fellow brawler who is human who has been killed. And in 2 of those cases, their breasts are described for some reason. And I think that's odd. In both cases, it adds nothing to the scene. And in both cases, with the female boss and the dead female crawler, they either are already naked or have their clothes destroyed so that their breasts are bared and attention is brought to them. And I don't understand why. I don't understand what a narrative focus on characters' breasts is doing for either of these scenes or characters. And it's not like we're constantly focused on every character's body and anatomy and describing it. Carl has not had pants on this whole time. He is wearing boxers. No one is describing his legs in a detailed way. No one is seeing the outline of anything through his boxers. No one seems concerned with that whatsoever. However, we do need to apparently describe, there's a dead woman who is naked. Also, I don't think I read that part, but it describes her being naked and then immediately reiterates that she's naked. This is another example of the prose being unnecessarily repetitive, but the woman was naked. She had no clothes. What? You're telling me she's naked and she had no clothes? And then later on that same page, we're talking about how she was killed because she's dead. She's been murdered. A gunshot wound right in her chest, which would have been descriptive enough. A gunshot wound right in her chest. That's a pretty, definitive way to die. And yet it doesn't stop there. For no purpose that I can discern, we continue on to highlight that it was between her breasts. So we've highlighted that this dead woman is naked and has no clothes. At least there is a reason for that, because the point is that she has no clothes, no gear, she's been looted. She was killed and then all of her things were taken. But then later on the same page, we're told she has a gunshot wound to the chest. And we already know she's naked. So we can assume that the gunshot wound is somewhere near her breasts because that's how anatomy works. And yet, it's not enough. We have to draw attention to her breasts that we know are not covered by clothes. For what reason? For what reason? What is the narrative purpose of that? Then we also have, I'm not going to read much from this scene because I would consider it a spoiler, and I will talk about it more in depth in the spoiler section, the first boss fight, which I have issues with personally. But I will read this one line to you because I think it demonstrates what I'm talking about with this, to me, odd narrative focus on highlighting characters' breasts. So this is a boss fight. The tattered remains of the woman's filthy t-shirt burned away, revealing pendulous, stretch-marked breasts that fell over a sagging, equally marred stomach. And my note is, why? Why? What does that add to the scene? I also personally don't love the framing of calling stretch marks on any part of someone's body, their skin being marred by stretch marks. What is with that language? It's so odd. Stretch marks are so very normal. for so many human beings. Most human beings probably have stretch marks, but also just like why are her breasts having attention drawn to them like that? And earlier, I think on the page before that, it specifically brings up that she's not wearing a bra. Why? Like, I know I keep repeating that, but I genuinely would love, I would love an explanation as to why the narrative is coming back to this again and again. This boss fight is the first time we're interacting with a woman, and this is how she's described. The next woman we interact with is the dead woman, who's described as naked, and then attention is brought to her breasts completely unnecessarily. Why is the narrative doing this, is my question. And I want to clarify, there is nothing wrong with nudity in general, or breasts existing, or acknowledging that people have breasts. However, I can't ignore the fact that women's bodies are sexualized all the time and objectified all the time in media. It is so common, it is so frequent for women's bodies to be objectified for no reason, serving no purpose. The male gaze in film, close-ups where there don't need to be close-ups, slow-mo where there doesn't have to be slow-mo in women's sports, highlighting the fact that women have breasts when they're just existing and no part of the male anatomy is being highlighted. And I just ask, what are these details contributing? Why are they there? I think within the context, living in a world that we live in a society where objectification and sexualization of women is so ever present. I think authors should have a genuine, real reason to be bringing up women's bodies in that context, to be describing women's breasts. Because for me reading this, I'm not gonna lie, it started to feel like the classic example of men writing women breasting boobily. Oh, you have a boss fight? It's supposed to be scary and intense? Yeah, well, she's going to breast boobily as you do it. Oh, this woman's dead? Yeah, well, she can even breast boobily when she's dead. It's incredible. Like, what? For why? Okay, I'm fine. I'll calm down now. Will I calm down? I don't know. But I will stop talking about it. Okay, I'm gonna get into spoilers now, I think, because I want to talk more about this boss fight. This is really my biggest issue with the first third, the thing that is really not sitting well with me, and I don't want to spoil it, so I'm going to talk now in spoilers about this. So feel free to watch these if you don't care about spoilers or if you've already read the book, but if you have not read it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, then you can use the chapters to skip to the end of this section, but I am going to talk about this boss fight and how it landed with me now. So I'm going to read the description because I think it matters. This was a human woman, about 35 years old, enormously fat. She wore a filthy and ripped t-shirt and no bra, and her skin was covered in open sores and scabs. A blue pair of sweatpants with the word pink along the leg appeared to be stretched to their limits. Her black hair clung to her head in clumps. Like me, she wore no shoes. She was also 15 feet tall. That description to me immediately raises red flags because there are things about her that make her scary in the context of a boss fight. The number one for me personally would be the fact that she's 15 fucking feet tall. Because holy shit, do you want to fight someone who is trying to kill you who is 15 feet tall? I certainly do not. None of the other parts of this are monstrous. A woman being 35, not monstrous. Being fat, not monstrous. Oh, she's wearing a dirty and ripped t-shirt with no bra? Run away screaming. How scary. Like, okay. Her skin is covered in open sores and scabs. That sounds painful for her, but again, not scary, not horrifying. And certainly her wearing a pair of pink sweatpants that are not oversized is not scary to me. Her hair being greasy, also not scary, and her not wearing shoes, not scary. But all of that is very much focused on, and then the fact that she's 15 feet tall feels like a bit of an afterthought. I think that's weird. I think specifically highlighting she's not wearing a bra is weird. Then we get a description of this boss. The Hoarder, level 7 neighborhood boss. Trapped in her pile of rubbish, abandoned by society, the war inside her head has seeped out of her mind and infected both her body and her surroundings. Now nothing more than a garbage troll, the Hoarder is a horrific reminder of what can happen to those who fall out of the light. Protected by her minions, she'll do anything to keep her precious stockpile safe. Now, that is a description coming from the video game, coming from the AI, the aliens. I don't like the description, but it's not coming from the narrator. What is coming from the narrator, which is Carl, it's in first person, so all of the narration is Carl's perspective. What does come from Carl is a focus on her being enormously fat, no bra, and highlighting the blue pair of sweatpants with the word pink along the leg appeared to be stretched to their limits. Why are those the details that matter? Why would you not start with the fact that she's 15 feet tall? Okay, so anyways, then we get into the scene. She is speaking Spanish, and it is not translated in the text. And I think, okay, I have seen mixed reactions to whether this should have been translated or not. I personally think that it should have been translated, not because I think that people can't look it up and translate it themselves. I did that. I'm sure most people who read it did. But I also think within even the narrative itself that Carl points out that he's glad he couldn't understand her because it made it easier to do what he did. And that to me is giving an out, both for Carl and for any reader who doesn't speak Spanish, to not confront the horror of the situation. And that to me feels antithetical to what apparently people are saying the point of this scene is, which is to point out how horrifying it is, to point out how unethical and evil and exploitative the aliens are and the AI is. If that is the case, then let us sit in the horror. Let us understand her fear, because I don't speak Spanish. We don't learn Spanish in school in Canada. So all I got from this was Carl describing her as being scared and crying. But I didn't understand the text until I translated it. And I think that was worth knowing, even if it was a footnote, even if it was stated that the AI was able to translate things and translated it for him, or if Carl spoke Spanish and could translate for us. Or Donut, who was super smart and probably can translate. None of those things happened. This dialogue points out that she is terrified. She thinks she's in hell. She doesn't know what's happening. She is extremely afraid. She is begging for help. And Carl doesn't understand what she's saying, but he does say, shit, I think she's a person. Like she was in her house when it happened and they turned her into this thing. We should help her. We go, and I appreciated that moment of compassion from Carl, his realization that this is a human person and she is scared and doesn't want to be here. We have to help her. That is relatable. I would also feel that. I think a lot of people would feel that. I think we, the reader, are meant to feel that. But then we immediately cut the tension and the emotion and the moral question of, if she also is scared and doesn't want to be there, is it ethical to kill her so that you survive? Or do you have a moral obligation to try to help her along with yourself? We cut immediately to Donut saying, yeah, that'll be a no, which is obviously meant to be delivered as funny. The phrasing, yeah, that'll be a no. And she immediately starts shooting missiles at the woman. And this is where we get the tattered remains of the woman's filthy t-shirt burning away, revealing pendulous stretch-marked breasts that fell over a sagging, equally marred stomach. So we go from acknowledging her humanity and that she's scared and they should help her to Donut immediately dropping a quippy joke to cut the tension and then attacking her violently, and then we objectify her body again. We get no argument from Carl. He doesn't fight for helping her again. He doesn't push back on Donut. He doesn't try again. He just goes along with it at this point. And he goes along with it to the point of starting to strangle her to death. He then thinks the poor woman gurgled and thrashed. Her health moved downward slowly but steadily. They have silly banter back and forth as this happens. You're doing it. A little help here. My missiles aren't ready yet. Use your fucking claws. She's almost dead. You can kill them when I kill her. God damn it, Donut. So funny and quirky. They're back and forth as he strangles a woman who is terrified and begging for help. The hoarder lay on her back. Her health bar was all but empty. Steam rose off of her. The broken half of the leash remained around her neck. I had to finish her off now before she puked more bugs. I scrambled toward her. The woman's eyes met mine as I raised my fist. I'm sorry if I was a bad person, she said. She closed her eyes as tears streamed down the non-burned side of her face. The woman only had one misshapen tooth in her mouth. I didn't want my daughter to get sick. Are we in hell? Please, please send me to Jesus. Again, it is not translated, so if you don't speak Spanish, you're just going to see Spanish on the page. And then we get this. I'm sorry, I said. I punched her right in the nose. I felt it give underneath my fist, almost like it was an aluminum can wrapped in clay. It crumbled and crunched deep inside. I punched again and again. My fist burned in pain, and I took my own damage with each blow. A minute later, and she was dead. Okay, now I read that, and I think, okay, so Carl is going to be really fucked up over that. Carl's going to be really upset. He's going to be a mess. How is he going to process that? Because we've now been introduced to the moral dilemma that the dungeon bosses can just be regular human beings who were transformed and trapped and are terrified, don't understand what's happening, think they're in hell and are scared and don't deserve to be killed. But I don't feel like that chapter allowed me to sit in that discomfort or the dilemma. I don't think Carl was allowed to sit in it. As soon as he had the thought of we should help her, Donut makes a joke, starts firing missiles at her, and immediately the moral dilemma is eliminated. We're just going to kill her now. No more discussion, no debate. And after he kills her, after saying sorry one time, then in the next chapter, they go back to Mordecai for more tutorial time for him to answer all their questions. And he wants to ask Mordecai about bosses. And he says, the one we fought, she was obviously a person from our world. Is it always going to be like that? I hadn't understood a word the woman was saying, and I was glad for it. I already had enough trouble sleeping. Personally, I don't think that it is the more interesting or more emotionally resonant choice narratively to not allow Carl and the reader, unless they happen to speak Spanish, to understand what she's saying. I think that makes it more devastating. Yes, people can look it up, but also people can choose not to look it up and to not know what she said, in which case I think the scene lands differently. Mordecai explains it. Carl doesn't seem particularly shaken up or upset. I think he might say at one point that he feels sick to his stomach about it, which is his go-to emotional reaction to anything. He feels sick to his stomach or he feels sick, and that's all he will say about his emotions. That to me isn't enough. I feel like the text is repeatedly creating emotional distance between the reader and the actual horror of the situation, and I don't think that that serves what the book is seemingly trying to do. The Spanish is untranslated. We repeatedly focus on her body, on her fatness, on her breasts, on her stretch marks. We focus on those things even more than we focus on the genuinely monstrous aspects of her, like being 15 feet tall, or the fact that insects are coming out of her mouth. Carl explicitly saying that he's glad he couldn't understand what she was saying because that would have made it more painful and difficult. If we are describing a woman who is marginalized in multiple ways and portraying her as monstrous, even if the novel is trying to have compassion for her, apparently, I think that if this is a real person and we're meant to have compassion and it's meant to be upsetting and hard, I want the novel to make me confront it. I want the novel to make Carl confront it. What is the point of making a spectacle of her body and objectifying her and dehumanizing her like that, only for the book to constantly recoil from actually confronting the emotional repercussions and the moral repercussions of this scene and her suffering? Why is so much of the narrative attention on her body and on the very normal human body things like having stretch marks rather than on her fear, her confusion, her pain, her humanity? Why is she made to be monstrous over and over again? And the implication being again and again that the things about her that are just human traits are monstrous. I really needed the scene to sit in that emotional aftermath longer. I needed Carl to wrestle with it longer. I needed him to not immediately switch from we need to help her to okay, let's murder her right now without any intermediary, without any negotiation, without trying to talk to her, without trying literally anything. I think Donut's role in that scene was to be funny and to cut the tension and to bring levity, and I don't think that was particularly appropriate within the scene, if again the purpose of the scene was what I thought it was meant to be. And then we move very quickly out of this scene, out of this chapter, back into tutorial, mechanics, achievements, loot, progress, talking through how the game works, logistics, jokes, quipping, banter. It felt like there were no emotional consequences, and we got over it immediately. And then in chapter 14, we get from Donut, again, they watch the first episode of the show, and her reaction is verbatim, after that epic battle with Hoarder, just Hoarder, after that epic battle with Hoarder, we received no screen time. This is unacceptable. Oh yeah, the epic battle with a terrified woman who you murdered, who didn't know what was happening, was scared, was asking for help, and wondering if she was in hell. And that doesn't land well with me. I don't think the scene was particularly well executed, and I have done a bit of research since reading it the other day because it hit me like a truck. And I kept trying to think about ways that I could understand the framing. And I tried reading perspectives from people who both disliked and liked the scene and people who had different feelings about it. And it seemed like a lot of people agree that it's a hard scene, that it's a tragic scene. I just don't agree that the book treats it like that. I don't think the narrative gives it time to be tragic. And because of that, it feels objectifying, dehumanizing. And I find it in poor taste. I think if you're going to depict a woman, fat woman, a Spanish-speaking fat woman, clearly struggling with her mental health in this way, then I feel like care should be taken not to dehumanize her and to sit with the discomfort of, okay, we're using this situation, we're pointing out how terrible the AI is, how terrible the aliens are for causing this woman to suffer like this. But we also need to sit with what this means for Carl, what this means for her. We need to feel the pain and suffering that she's going through so that we're feeling empathy for her and the situation is given time to breathe. I felt terrible for her during the scene, but it felt like the scene was constantly trying to pull my attention away from the tragedy. And I don't know how that serves the scene or the emotional beat or the social commentary if that's what it's trying to do. I think the execution of the scene is constantly at odds with the actual content of the scene and the potential of the scene. And because of that, I felt very uncomfortable with how this character was portrayed. And I felt honestly upset on her behalf, even though she is fictional, because I felt like it was very dehumanizing and then moved on from very quickly. And it felt like no one mourned her. And I found that very upsetting. We then get a scene where they apparently blow up a bunch of babies, goblin babies. And again, in that scene, I think the point is supposed to be that it's horrifying that they were forced to murder a bunch of infants, even if they're, monster infants. But then they're not even in the room. Carl doesn't even see them, and Donut only sees them for an instant. And then they don't see the aftermath. They don't reckon with the reality of the situation. And then when it's brought up again in an achievement about how they murdered infants, it's framed as a joke. And again, it's moved on from very quickly. Am I supposed to be devastated by that? Am I supposed to be disturbed by that? Or is it a punchline, haha, murdering baby goblins? I can't tell, because it feels like the book doesn't know what it wants to do. Or it's unwilling to fully commit to the horror, so it keeps pulling back with oddly timed jokes. And for me personally, that's not working. It's not landing. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap up spoilers there, I think. I've been talking for way longer than I thought I would be, and I want to go and read the next third of the book so I can hopefully get more context and spend more time with the characters and in the world. But just some final thoughts to wrap us up for the first third. I'm just finding that the things that I typically value in the books that I read, the things that typically really draw me in and that I care about and that I appreciate in the books I read are the things that feel like they're being less emphasized here. Deep characterization, emotional interiority and resonance, atmosphere, sense of place, prose, complex and nuanced thematic explorations, sitting with the moral dilemmas that the book introduces. And it feels so far like the book is much more focused on or interested in the mechanics, the tutorials, the progression, the action, and the jokes. And unfortunately, those are just not drawing me in. And I'm not particularly interested in those aspects. And there's nothing inherently wrong with prioritizing those things, but they are not what I value in a book that I read, and I am not feeling very engaged. And I do think that some of the ideas that Matt Dinniman is bringing up, some of the concepts that he is touching on, some of the subject matter that he's including in the game as a whole and also in quick throwaway jokes, some of those things are pretty serious and I think deserve a little bit more time. And see what I see. I do hope that the book turns it around, that I start to get it. I would love to love this book. I do think the first third was a pretty rough start. I'm not sure if it can turn it around enough for me to love it. I do think the first third was a pretty rough start for me personally. So maybe that is unlikely, but I still have hope that it could win me over. So I'm going to go keep reading. I'll come back when I get to 66% and I will let you know how it's going. Hopefully I will talk less at that point. We shall see. We just shall see. So I'll be back soon. I'm going to go keep reading. I just hit the 2/3 mark, roughly, a little bit more, 70% of the way through, just finished chapter 5. And I think this is going to be a much shorter update than the last one. I think a lot of what I said in the last update still applies for me. I just have a couple follow-ups, a couple check-ins to do based on what I've learned about the characters and the storytelling since then, and just some of my observations from the first third that I felt were worst in the second. I can't say I'm having a lot of fun with this. And you know what? I feel really disappointed. And obviously not every book is for every person. And that's kind of the premise I was testing with this video, because this was one of those books that was being touted as for everyone, that, you know, no matter who you are and your background with LitRPG or video games in general, that you were likely to enjoy this book. And I mean, it is wildly popular with a bunch of different demographics. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I don't find it funny. I did get my first genuine laugh. I think it was over 200 pages in. Donut was injured in a fight and being very dramatic. This mortal coil is shed. And I love the combo of Shakespeare reference and cat humor. Very much up my alley. I think that's the only time reading this that I've laughed out loud. There are just so many jokes in this book. It's actually kind of relentless with the jokes, and so many of them are not landing for me. And I mean, I think that's just how it is when a book is so focused on the comedy of it all. One thing I do struggle with is that so many of the jokes come from the system itself. And the framing is meant to be that the system, or the aliens who have created the system, or the AI running the system, are evil. Very bad. And we are meant to view them as such. And Carl often views them as such and often thinks that the jokes aren't funny. I think he also references laughing for the first time pretty far into the book. He semi-regularly comments that a lot of the jokes are just stupid. So it's interesting that we are kind of expected, it seems, to not find all of those introductions of bosses, achievements, descriptions of loot, and various creatures funny. And yet it seems like, I mean, that's the majority of the jokes. The majority of the jokes are coming from those. And then there's also, I mean, Donut quips quite a bit as well. But I have seen a lot of reviews. I've been parsing non-spoiler reviews at a variety of star ratings to get more of an understanding, because honestly, I'm starting to feel like an alien because I don't get it. I'm so confused. I don't get it. And I was hoping reading reviews would help. It's not helping. But I am noticing a lot of people saying that it was just relentlessly funny, or they found all the achievements so funny. And maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but my interpretation is that we are supposed to find a lot of those in poor taste, based on ridiculous stereotypes, at least mildly offensive, and often just stupid. I'm a little confused about it. I don't know if it's all meant to be funny or not, but it does seem like people find it funny, and that is just a difference in opinion, I guess, because it's not working for me. I have seen a lot of people describe this book as being very character focused, or that what's so great about it is the characters, or that it's very shockingly empathetic or tender or emotional. I don't know where that's coming from, to be honest, because there are moments where Carl reflects on the situation he's in. There are moments when he feels bad. There are moments when he feels guilty. There are moments when he's sad and distraught about the situation, but they're moments. They are brief. He lets himself face it for 10 seconds and then he shuts it down. And it's happened a handful of times. For me, that's just not enough. I especially not to describe the book in those terms personally. It very much doesn't feel like the book is emphasizing the emotional experience or consequences. And it doesn't have to necessarily, but I am confused by classifying it that way or selling the book that way. It does seem from a couple of reviews that maybe in later books that becomes a bigger piece of the puzzle, which is fine and all, but I read one book at a time. I review one book at a time. I am not reviewing. I'm very based on my experience so far, I'm very unlikely to read the rest of the books in the series again, unless the last third really blows me away. And I'm not reviewing those books because I haven't read them. I'm just looking at this book in isolation. And even in a series, even within a series, I believe that a book, especially a first book in a series, should stand alone enough that you can understand what it's going for. You can understand its themes, if it has any, its commentary, if it has any, that it has at least a little bit of character development. And I just, for me, there's not enough. There's not enough from Carl. There's not enough from Donut. Definitely not enough complexity for their characters. They feel so one note. The whole structure of the story is very repetitive, but also their interaction is very repetitive, and they're just not going deeper. Carl is very attached to the idea of the dungeon not breaking him, and he's using that as a mantra, and he uses it as a way to shut down his emotions, which is maybe a realistic way to survive, but I don't find it particularly interesting in a character in a novel. And as someone who's a very character-driven reader, and I'm interested in how characters are being impacted by the situations they're in, I just don't feel like I'm getting that out of this. I also actually went back and looked at something because I kept it. Obviously, this existed in the first third as well, but in the second third, I feel like there were increasing mentions of mana. And I thought to myself, I feel like I can infer what mana means. It's clearly, power, or a resource of some kind. You have to wait to recharge it. It's required to do certain spells. Like, I can kind of guess what it is. But I thought to myself, do I actually know what this is? Did the book explain it? And I searched it in the ebook and it was never explained. Even in the extensive tutorials, several tutorials, it was never explained. And I think that's odd because so many things are explained to such intricate detail, and that seems like a pretty major thing. So I researched it, and it is, in fact, a measurement of energy for magical spells within certain types of games. And that seems like the kind of thing that would be explained in the many paragraphs of info dumping about the mechanics of the game. It just seems odd how many things are explained at great length and how many things are just ignored or assumed to be understood already by the audience. I also think that for me personally, this does not work as satire. It doesn't feel like it's effectively satirizing the communities and the stereotypes that it is invoking. It feels like it is leaning on stereotypes, recognizable things that we know, recognizable tropes of people that we know, like the gym bro, without actually saying anything about it. It's representing this stereotype of a person, but it's not commenting on it. It's not analyzing it. It's not saying anything about it. And to me, that's not satire or social commentary. It's just depicting stereotypes, which books are allowed to do. I just don't find it particularly interesting. I would be curious to know, for anyone who's read this, if you feel like the various bosses especially are clearly, based on the text, clearly a satire or a social commentary or something specific. Because what is the commentary that the gym bro boss is delivering, other than if you take this already exaggerated stereotype to an even more exaggerated extreme, it's kind of ridiculous. Okay, I'm also struggling with the imbalance in which communities are being satirized most often, or I should specifically say that I feel that women are the target of the exaggerated stereotyping significantly more often than men are. There is a character who is associated with the games, but not a boss or a creature within the games, and her breasts are described in great detail and described to be grotesque. I think the book might be trying to say something with something it reveals about said breasts a little bit later. But for me personally, the reveal was not enough to undo the fact that that incredibly detailed description was laid out on the page in the first place, and that we read it, and that Carl was so focused on it and so disgusted by it, by the words used to describe her breasts. I don't understand why this is such a persistent image. Perhaps later we will get many descriptions of bodies of all types, but so far the main bodies that are being described are women's bodies that are being described as fat and therefore unappealing, or women's breasts that are being described as huge or pendulous and therefore unappealing, or breasts just being mentioned because why not, or women's bodies being commented on because they're very thin. It just feels like there's a lot of commenting on women's bodies and specifically their breasts. And why? I just don't I don't see a purpose. I don't see what it brings to the table. I don't see what it adds to the story. And it is starting to feel very uneven. So, do I have more non-spoilery things? No, I mean, I just don't. It's not really going anywhere. It's quite repetitive. We're doing the same things over and over again. We meet interesting characters occasionally, and then we leave them behind. It's a lot of Carl and Donut having fights. And you know what? It didn't even occur to me necessarily. It didn't even occur to me, at least not on this scale, as I went into this. But I also have never been a big fight scene person. I love fantasy and I love epic fantasy. But if I'm reading the kind of epic fantasy that has huge epic battles, I do like them to not last for a whole chapter or several chapters. I like them to be a little bit more brief because I'd rather deal with the aftermath or the political machinations that lead up to the battle and what it means afterwards and how they pick up the pieces or the emotional aftermath of the losses in the battle or whatnot. And this book is very much about battles, equipping the right thing from your inventory to get the most damage. Yeah, and again, perhaps LitRPG is just not my genre. That is kind of the conclusion I'm coming to. And I am disappointed because I really did think that from the way people were talking about this, that perhaps this was the book to bridge the gap and that everyone could love this book. And I'm just finding that it's not, I don't think it's for me, and I'm not having a very good time. So yeah, I'm really hoping that the last third pulls it out of the bag and does something really interesting. The end of the last chapter I read kind of seemed like it might lead in an interesting direction. I am open to being pleasantly surprised. I don't think that anything the book does in the last third could undo my experiences of the first 2/3 necessarily, but a strong ending can have a big impact. I hope that it has one, but I am struggling to understand the hype very much so currently. So yeah, I'll do a brief spoiler section. Skip this if you haven't read the book and you don't want to hear my spoiler thoughts. You can use the chapters down below to skip. But spoilers for the first 2/3 of the book up to, what did I read? The end of chapter 35? Yes, starting now. Spoilers. Spoilers. I do appreciate that Carl has a couple moments of reflection on his experiences. I appreciated that he thought back to the hoarder, for example, I think twice, or he thought back to the hoarder once and to the goblin babies once. But every moment that he has of reflecting on what he's done and how he feels about it is cut so short that it really, I just start to feel like, oh, we're going to get a moment, and then it's ended. And I find that very frustrating. I just want to spend a little more time sitting in the moral discomfort. Also, the Karen is such a strange boss to me. It seems like an amalgamation of so many different stereotypes. She's an anti-vaxxer, she's in pyramid schemes, she's a Karen who wants to talk to your manager. I think her minion fairies are described as pudgy middle-aged ladies. It just goes on and on and on. There's so many things that are apparently associated. And again, my qualm with all the bosses is, what is the commentary? That people who join MLMs and are anti-vax kind of suck? Is that commentary? Like, I just kind of feel like I have a higher expectation, I suppose, of what commentary should entail. I don't feel like the book is telling me anything about any of these people other than, once again, that exaggerating an already exaggerated stereotype makes something ridiculous. That feels like it's more attempting to be comedic than it is attempting to comment on something. And there is, satire can involve making something more extreme, exaggerating something to more easily be able to point out various aspects of it and the dynamics at play and the repercussions, and exaggerating for effect or exaggerating for comedic effect to be able to point out something about a particular dynamic or group or person or whatever can be part of satire, of course. But it's not that in a vacuum. There has to be more to it. There has to be an actual point being made. And I don't feel like that. I feel like that is really what I'm missing in the boss fights. There feels like there is no point being made. And you could, I'm not saying that you can't draw a conclusion or you couldn't come up with a point, because I think you could. I think you could sit down and say, okay, here are the stereotypes being examined. Again, you have your gym bro. What is this saying about toxic masculinity and the ways that men are expected to be so big and strong to the point where they, become a caricature of themselves, etc., right? You can pull from your own knowledge of the world and society and look at the stereotypes being brought into the book and guess at what the book is saying, but the book is not saying that. The book doesn't, that's not on the page. It doesn't exist. It exists perhaps in the reader's mind, and perhaps the point is to create that thought in the reader's mind. The book is saying, hey, look at the stereotype. And then you as the reader are saying, oh, that stereotype makes me think about this and this. These are the implications. This is how I process this. Or, depending on the reader, some readers read that and just think, haha, funny. That guy waddles around because his muscles are so big and all he can say is, bro, spot me, bro. And I think that's the issue, maybe, with leaving the actual analysis and commentary and satire up to the reader, because not every reader is going to do that work. I enjoy a book that allows me to do work and to engage with the book, but I do want the book to do a little bit of the work. I do want the book to at least present an idea that I can then riff on. I don't love when a book expects me to create all of the meaning. And a lot of that is going to be interpretation, and not everyone will agree that that's what this book is doing, but that's how it feels to me. It feels like the book is just presenting a person, a type of person, and saying, okay, here you go. Create some interesting commentary for this in your mind while we murder them. And then once we're done murdering them, we'll move on to another stereotype that you can create all the meaning in your own mind as we murder them. And again, I can think about the implications of, toxic masculinity and unrealistic body standards and gendered expectations of bodies in my own free time based on real people and real life examples, and not based on extremely over-exaggerated and intentionally grotesque caricatures that are monstrous, that are now going to be murdered. Like, for me, that doesn't add anything. And the text even goes on to explicitly say that Carl is coming up with this theory that the dungeon is combining real life stereotypes on Earth with alien species and doing so as commentary. And he brings it up to Mordecai, and Mordecai says, that's mostly correct. Again, it's not really something I can discuss, but this isn't exactly some big secret either. Some of these monsters are made by AI. Some are simply the actual creatures from their world. The Tusklings and the Ball of Swine, for example. And some, like you've deduced, are created by a team of writers. Like with anything that's been put together by a team, what you end up with can vary wildly. Those llamas, for example, they are unique to your planet, and I don't recall anything in your culture that suggests that they should be anthropomorphized as drug-dealing gangbangers. Someone just thought it'd be an interesting combo. Not everything will be social commentary. It's usually just stupid, I muttered. So even the text is pointing out that not all of these monsters, not all the bosses, are social commentary. Some of them are just things mashed together, presumably mostly for comedic effect based on the tone of the book in general and how the characters react to them and how they're talked about. But even the ones that are maybe meant to be social commentary, again, I don't feel that the commentary actually exists on the page. And for me, that's not enough to actually call the book social commentary. Okay, I think I've hammered that point home for way too long, so I'm gonna move on. The last thing I will talk about in the spoiler section is Odette, the TV interviewer, whose breasts are described. Let me read it to you, so you know what I'm talking about. And the reveal is, of course, that the breasts aren't real. Not only that they are breast implants or something, which is what Carl assumes at first, but that they literally are just like a breastplate that this character is wearing, and that it's essentially, a literal breastplate like armor, but with these exaggerated hyper-realistic breasts. Once again, I'm not sure what the commentary is meant to be. Literally the only thing I could think of as I racked my brain, other than women being sexualized in the media, which feels ironic, is maybe commentary on the ridiculous breastplates and armor that female video game characters are given, because apparently their breasts have to be on display, or at least very clearly defined in their armor for some reason. But again, that commentary is not on the page. I am trying to find a reason for this to exist. Okay, here is the passage. But the oddest part of this woman was her torso. Her naked ebony body from her stomach to her neck was that of a plus-sized human model who had bribed a third-world plastic surgeon into enhancing her breasts well beyond anything that could ever be considered natural or sexy. Who cares if they're sexy? Carl apparently needed to add that in there. Or anything other than what the fuck. Again, this is Carl's internal monologue that we're reading, our main character. The colossal breasts sat atop the table like a pair of pigs suckling against their mother. Her nipples faced downward, her was absurdly oversized, even on the massive breasts, each the size of a DirecTV satellite dish. Did they need to be described at all, let alone such a detailed, full paragraph? It's not even done yet. There was no conceivable way, even as big as she was, that her body could sustain those ginormous breasts without her back breaking like a twig. Jesus, no wonder this show is so damn popular. Thanks, Carl. Thanks. Turns out that the breasts are not attached to the woman, so thank goodness, I suppose. Carl continues to stare at them and ask questions about them. And again, I don't feel that there is commentary on the page or that there was a reason for that. Not only do I not feel there is a reason for this plot point, but there also is no reason, as far as I can tell, for us to linger on it so long. For why? What is it doing? What does it add to the story and the themes? Women are sexualized on TV? Wow. Groundbreaking. Amazing. I've never thought of that before. Just saying this thing happens is not commentary. Just saying, look at this stereotype. Doesn't this stereotype exist? Is not commentary. I feel like I'm losing it. Anyway, I would just love, if I could go the rest of the book without any breasts being described, I would be very grateful. Do you think we can manage it? I don't know. Okay, here's what I will say before I end the spoiler section. I would genuinely like to hear your thoughts on the things I'm talking about. If you've read this book and you interpreted these things differently than me, if you feel like you have evidence in the text of the specific commentary that's being made by these various descriptions and stereotypes and exaggerations, I would really like to read them. I'm also interested in your theories if you just have theories about what you think the book could be trying to say, but I think it's one thing to have a theory based on very little textual evidence, and it's another thing to say in the book it says this, and I just feel the book is doing very little of the second. I don't let other people's opinions sway how I feel about books, clearly, because this book is so loved, and I am putting myself out there on the internet to get yelled at once again, because it is what it is. I do think it's weird to read the comments on 1 and 2 star reviews of this book, and the vitriol, the anger, but also the kind of terminology that's being thrown around makes me question who the target demographic of this book is and who the people who are most in arms defending it are and why they feel like this is a book for them. You know, it just raises questions for me, I think. And I would be curious to see, I don't know how many more bosses we get before the end of the book. I appreciate seeing a couple more male bosses to even it out, but I would also appreciate some bosses that feel like they are satirizing the extreme right, which it doesn't feel like the book is doing yet. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, I think that's it for spoilers. I would be curious to hear your thoughts, of course, in the comments. Share them if you so wish. I meant for this to be a short update, and it's not short. That is it. Those are my thoughts on the second third. I wanted to be able to come back and feel like it had really turned it around, but that was not my experience of the second third. We have one more third to go, so there's still a chance. I'm starting to lose hope, but I am trying to maintain at least a glimmer of it, mostly for my own sanity. Wish me luck. Will I come back with my whole mind changed? I don't see how, but it could happen. Stranger things have happened. Well, I finished it, and Yoda's here to help. I'm going to summarize. I'm going to try to put a bow on my thoughts because none of them have really changed getting to the end of the book. They just sort of solidified and reinforced what I was feeling early on. So I think, again, my impression from reviews and reactions and so on, I think what works for most of the people who love this, as far as I can tell, is the characters, the humor, and the structure, the whole lit RPG of it all. We already established the structure. The lit RPG is not something that I had read before, and I discovered in reading this that it is not for me. I personally found it really lowered the stakes because it was many small battles and then 4, 5, 6 medium-sized battles, but nothing ever felt like a big battle. Nothing ever felt particularly dramatic or dangerous. I never worried that Carl and Donut would survive. The stakes were very low, despite the book being largely battles to the death. And it just felt like there was no overarching through line of tension and stakes. It was the little hills and valleys. And for me, that just wasn't as engaging. I wanted more of a full book through line, even if we did have many smaller battles, and I didn't feel like I really got that. My impression in finishing the first book is that the reason maybe why that doesn't exist is that there is a full series through line, and that's fine. That works for some people. I am not a series reader in that way. I do read many series, but I appreciate when my series have individual books that can stand alone on some level, that they have their own arc, they have their own character development, that they have their own climax and denouement and themes being developed. Each book in a series has something that is bringing to the table outside of what it contributes to the series as a whole. And I felt like this was the first part in a longer story, not only because it felt like it cut off quite abruptly, and also that it was a relatively short book and also a book that was focused on the very beginning of Carl's journey, but also because it felt like it was setting up potential character development in the future, potential themes to explore in the future, possibly mysteries to be unraveled about the world, without really delivering on any of them, at least in the first book. And I personally think it's possible to do both. I think a book can be satisfying in and of itself, and that it can contribute to a larger narrative within a series. Not everyone values that as much as I do, as I have seen from past series that I have read and reviewed. But for me, this wasn't satisfying as a single book. And despite the fact that I can acknowledge that it's part of a series, for me, it didn't do enough. It didn't engage me enough. It didn't draw me in enough. It didn't deliver enough satisfaction for reading it to me to entice me to continue with the series. I don't have an interest in continuing, so I won't ever get any of that, unfortunately. I think one of the places where this landed the most for me was in the character development. For a lot of people, the characters were a standout. They didn't really do it for me. Again, I just feel like I didn't get enough character development. I didn't get to know them enough. You spend so much time with them, but it's very one note. It's very repetitive, in my opinion. What we do get about them, I think Carl got a little bit more time to sit in his discomfort with the situation, with his upset over what's happened to his planet, over what he's been forced to do. He had a couple moments of his emotion breaking through, his more calm and reserved demeanor, and I appreciated those moments, but it kind of felt like too little too late for me personally. He had one moment of genuine sadness and almost eulogizing another character. And that was the most touching moment in the book for me. But again, it happened so late. And by that point, it was too little too late for me. I think this series clearly has themes and ideas it wants to explore, but I do not feel that this first book explored those themes in any meaningful way. It felt like setup to explore the themes later. I don't feel that the social commentary that was presented in this book or the stereotypes that were on display in this book were actually explored in any meaningful way. I would not be surprised if they are explored in later books. But again, that is not what I look for in a series. That is not something that I enjoy, having to wait who knows how many books in a series to finally get the exploration of a theme or an idea or a stereotype that was depicted in the first couple chapters. Hi, honey. It feels a little like I spent a lot of my time reading setup and seeing a lot of threads and paths and possible directions opened, and I'm just not interested enough to buy in to read who knows how many books in the hopes that these specific threads will be addressed again. And maybe they will. Maybe they all are in book 2. But again, I don't feel that this book delivered on its promise enough, on what I expect out of a book enough for me to be willing to spend my money and time reading another in the hopes that the satisfaction that I didn't get out of the first book. I also think the humor is a big thing for people. I think a lot of people have mentioned how fun this is, how funny it is, how entertaining it was for them. I've addressed this multiple times now. It just wasn't my humor. I didn't find it funny. There were a couple jokes I laughed at, maybe 2 or 3. And that's it. And there were a lot of jokes. That didn't change by the end of the novel. And part of it, I think, is that a lot of the humor feels very referential instead of analytical or insightful. A lot of the humor is just naming things. It's not that I'm against humor that is about commenting on aspects of our society or kinds of people that exist or traits that exist in society. I can definitely find that kind of humor funny. I think what I need is more than just naming things or combining things or exaggerating things, is naming it and then twisting it in an interesting way, or presenting an idea or a kind of person or a trope or a stereotype and then subverting it in an unexpected way, or depicting something and then pushing it to a more extreme place in service of commentary that is explicitly on the page, in the dialogue, in the delivery of the comedy that presents the aspect of this depiction that is meant to be interrogated through humor, where the commentary is explicit. A finer line, and a line that's going to be very different for different people, depending on your sense of humor and who you are as a person, obviously. People are going to react differently. I think it's very important to me with this kind of humor that it doesn't feel like someone is the butt of the joke. It doesn't feel that there is a lack of empathy in the comedy, in the humor, in the target of the humor and the joke. And in this book, I felt a bit of a lack of empathy for some of these stereotypes that were being depicted. And for me, that made a lot of the humor land more mean-spirited than maybe it was intended, but I found it quite unpleasant, personally. The novel tells us explicitly through Carl having a theory and then it being somewhat confirmed by Mordecai, his mentor, essentially, that the alien race, that the aliens who have created the dungeon are combining Earth stereotypes with alien species to serve a couple purposes: to teach the alien audiences about Earth and about Earth customs and what Earth people are like, to entertain the audience because it's reality TV, and maybe somewhat, somewhere, possibly as social commentary or a commentary on the ills of Earth. And Carl and Mordecai both seem to acknowledge that the AI and the aliens are not necessarily always hitting the mark, that they're not always combining things in a way that makes sense, that they're not always actually doing something interesting or making commentary with these combinations. As Carl says, sometimes it's just stupid. And yet there is no separation between what the aliens and the AI are doing and what the book is doing, because the book is depicting that and the book is not providing further social commentary. So all I get is what the aliens and the AI are doing. And as Carl said, a lot of the times it just feels pretty random. And it doesn't feel like there is further social commentary. It feels like the aliens who are making this, the aliens in the writer's room who put together these combos, don't actually understand the thing that they are attempting to satirize. But then the result of that is that the book doesn't seem to either, because again, I don't feel that there is an additional layer of commentary between what the book is presenting to us and what we get on the page. In part because Carl is not, for understandable reasons in the moment, analyzing the bosses and trying to understand whether there's social commentary there. And he is the narrator, where in his head it's first person. But I didn't find that satisfying or particularly insightful. And I think that can make it feel at times like the book is perpetuating the stereotypes that it's actually trying to comment on or satirize. I also think there is kind of an intrinsic irony to what this book is doing and how the audience is reacting to it and what the book is trying to say thematically. Because the novel is, if it has any themes, if it is criticizing anything, it is criticizing entertainment built on suffering and audiences who consume violence and drama and harm as spectacle, and desensitization, exploitation for ratings, dehumanization and sexualization for ratings, and finding the audience finding humor and fun and entertainment out of pain and suffering and death and horror. Yet so much of the book feels like it's trying to make me laugh at those very same things. It feels as though I, as the reader, am meant to laugh at least some of these horrifying situations, that I am meant to be entertained by the suffering of the characters. Maybe not directly, but that their journey is entertaining and fun and funny to me, despite the fact that they are fighting for their lives and their planet is being destroyed. And they might die a grisly, horrible death, and they're watching other people die, and they're having to kill other people to survive, and being put in these horrible situations and being exploited. But that is the entertainment. That is what the book is doing. And Carl is allowed to be upset at times about the situation he's in and what he's facing. But then the book itself, through its very structure and through its pacing and through constantly throwing in jokes to cut the tension in those moments, feels like it is trying to turn away from the serious repercussions of this setup, of this premise, and to turn to laughs and humor and entertainment in an ironic way, considering again the central commentary. How is a reader of this book who is laughing along and being entertained any different from the audience of this TV show who are laughing along and being entertained, outside of the fact that clearly the book is fiction and within the world of the book the games are not fiction? But I think you see my point. I think there is an irony in the entertainment value of the book being the same things that the book is critiquing when it's a TV show and an audience. I think the fandom and some of the behaviors I've seen in the fandom, just in my time trying to find theories about things or trying to find how fans talk about some of the scenes that really didn't land well for me, especially that first boss fight, I waded into fan spaces trying very hard to avoid any spoilers. And something I saw a lot was fans writing glurp glurp as a bit of a fan chant thing. And it reminded me very much of some of the fan chants that popped up, especially on Reddit after Project Hail Mary, that I must admit I found a little insufferable. But at least in the case of Project Hail Mary, despite not being a fan of that book, the fan chants and quotes and things that people repeat ad nauseum from that book are genuine character connection moments, or moments where a beloved character is very much being themselves, living their truth in a very endearing way. So I can understand the association is there. It's a positive association. It brings back positive feelings about the book and about the central relationship. I understand why people would want to feel those feelings again and bring it up. Glurp glurp, on the other hand, is literally the chant that the teenage boys who go to live viewings of the absolute most exploitative and disturbing talk show associated with this game show. These teen boys are depicted as the most depraved, the audience members with the least moral compass. Not only do they get entertainment out of a show where people are dying in the millions every day, but they then proceed to go watch an extra game show where the host invites people to then kill them off again in more humiliating ways, and while giving them the illusion of agency, the chance that they could survive and save the people they love, playing on their emotions to then destroy them even more thoroughly. And this audience of teen boys are watching this, consuming it, screaming for blood, essentially, and glurp glurp is their mindless chant of begging for more entertainment from pain, suffering, and death. And then you go into fan spaces of this book and someone says they read the first book and they loved it and they're going to read the whole series, and you get comments saying glurp glurp, and then you see 15 responses of other people saying glurp glurp. That to me feels dystopian and very ironic in a terrifying way, like the audience is buying into exactly the kind of dynamic that the author was trying to critique. And that to me seems to indicate, obviously it's not universal, but it leans toward the idea that the author did not thoroughly explore the themes that he was trying to explore, that he didn't state his opinion and his position clearly enough, that either people are missing the main point that the book was trying to explore, or they are just willfully ignoring it because it's more fun to do the fan chant, which again feels very ironic, to ignore the deeper message in service of the fun thing that is entertaining. There are other moments of irony, even within the book itself, moments of trying to make a comment, I believe, on women in the media, on TV, being sexualized, being objectified, having to play into their sexuality to be popular, to make a living, to be successful, and trying to subvert that in some way. And yet Carl, and therefore because everything is filtered through his lens, the book itself sexualizes and objectifies her and focuses in so much granular detail on her body that it just feels deeply ironic and like the point is being missed. Unless I'm forgetting something, I don't think any character's breasts were described in the last third of the book. So I will give the book that. I did appreciate the break. However, I continue to not appreciate how the female characters were described in this book, where the focus was, where the narrative focus was when women were on the page. Not all the time, but enough times that it became a pattern. Literally none of those cases did it feel relevant or necessary. And again, I think a lot of what doesn't work for me in the commentary in this book is that it feels like it's just reproducing what it is trying to satirize or comment on. And that is perhaps an execution issue. Perhaps it is just an interpretation thing where I interpret it that way, but someone else feels that the commentary was done very well. Again, I'm open to hearing other opinions, especially if you have quotes from the book that you feel support social commentary being done on the page. I think there are a couple moments where it tries to do that, especially around getting entertainment out of violence in media. However, like I said, I think that the way the book is written and the dynamic with the audience and the expectation that the reader gets entertainment out of the content of the book and the way the fandom has reacted to it all nullify that somewhat. And then the biggest thing for me is still just always going to be that first boss fight. I don't think it was well handled. I think it brings in a lot of complicated ideas, and I found it very dehumanizing. I feel a bit haunted by it, and I don't think it's enough personally to say that it's meant to be horrifying, because if that's the case, then I wish the book had treated it like it was horrifying and given it the weight it deserves. I don't think that happened either. I really wish that had been handled differently. And every time it was referred back to throughout the book, it made me feel angry. Not just that that happened to a fictional character, but also angry about how the book framed it and depicted it and how it continued to use it throughout the story. And again, that is my personal interpretation. That's how I felt about it. I am only one person. You might feel very differently about how it was handled, but that is where I sit. And I think those are all my points. I think that's all I have to say. What a journey. I think I've discovered that LitRPG is not for me, which is not hugely surprising, but I did hold out hope, even almost to the very end, a glimmer of hope that it could be for me. Alas, I think not. I do think the introduction of an animal companion for the animal companion at the end of the book is cute. And if I had had a little bit more fun throughout the book, enjoyed my time a little bit more, I would potentially continue reading primarily for more cute animal companion content. However, I'm not going to put myself through that. So those are my thoughts on Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm not going to share a spoiler section for the entire book because honestly, I don't think I have anything to say about the last third that requires a spoiler, especially nothing that I haven't already talked about or said probably multiple times. And honestly, I just kind of want to be done talking about it. So hopefully this is sufficient. Hopefully this helps you, if you haven't read the book, to kind of know what the book is doing and figure out if it might be for you. I would be curious to read your thoughts, but please be respectful to me and to each other in the comments. Please keep in mind that this is just my opinion, my experience, and my opinion and my experience is just that, my opinion, my experience, and has no bearing on yours. So if you loved the book, you are in the company of many thousands and you are allowed to enjoy it. I think I might give it 2 stars for now, trying to give it a bit of the benefit of the doubt, but as I sit with it longer, I might find that I feel better and that it feels more accurate to give it 1 star. I will have to see how I feel with time. But yeah, that's Dungeon Crawler Carl. You know, I try to challenge myself sometimes. I try to step outside of my comfort zone, and sometimes it works so well, and I find incredible books that I never would have read otherwise that I just adore. And unfortunately, this time that was not my experience, but I hope the video was interesting at the very least. Leave your comments down below. Leave your thoughts on Dungeon Crawler Carl, especially if you did not absolutely adore it, so that I feel a little less alone. Please share your experience. Thank you again so much to Merit for partnering with me on this video. Get 15% off exclusive sets with the link in my description box or by scanning this QR code, and every first purchase gets a free makeup bag. Thank you so much for watching this video. Leave an emoji down below representing Dungeon Crawler Carl in some way, shape, or form if you made it all the way to the end, so I know that you're a real one. Thank you for watching this whole probably very long video. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, respectfully engaging in discourse where we can have real deep conversations about books and really get into the nitty-gritty and hash it out and have ideas and share them, and where reasonable people can disagree and still be kind to each other. I really value the kind of discourse we can have here and the space that we are building here together. It means a lot to me. And I hope my next read is better and that whatever you read next is incredible for you as well. And that's it for me. I'm gonna get going. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.